Welcome to the Book of Urm, Chapter 3, Intrigues. Intrigues. "I've never seen a boy this young be so still," said Piecora, as she slowly drew a line of black Cillian ink down Orta's pale white face, right down the middle from his forehead, down his nose to his chin. Orta sat still as a statue, his eyes staring just past Piecora's face, unmoving. "Even you fidgeted more than this," she said, briefly looking up at Ravsés. Ravsés sat next to her son on the settee, holding his hand. Her face was already marked with the Banois Silijan ink, a circle drawn over her forehead, through her eyes and across her nose, with lines radiating outward across the rest of her face and down her neck, as if symbolizing the rising moon or the setting sun. "How do you know what marks to draw on us?" Ravsés asked, gently touching one of the stripes on her face with her finger. "Instinct, I suppose," Piecora replied. "I never did this for Serpendis, and now he's gone. I swore to never neglect another charge of mine after him. The Banoir elves, further east of Sienja, we trade with them. They give us Cillian ink to mark ourselves according to our beliefs, our feelings, our moods, even what we did that day, as this is also their custom. The Banoir cover their whole bodies with the marks of who they are and the stories of their lives. They taught us how to do this, and why. We wear these marks when we journey, when we prepare for that which has meaning to us, but most importantly, we wear these marks when we visit the Banoir. For only when we do this is there peace with them. Thus, we are exposed to them. Our intentions are clear to them. They can read us, and we them, even without any knowledge of language written or spoken, and there is no conflict." "That's a beautiful way to live," Ravsés said quietly. Piecora stopped for a moment and looked at her. "To some, yes," she said. "To others, barbaric, savage, uncouth. I've been called all these names and more." "I would never call you that," Ravsés said. "I don't know you, Piecora, but I can see you are none of those things. Those who feel the need to hide their natures are the ones who are truly savage." "Hence why they hide it," Piecora said. "I'd like to try it on my own next time," Ravsés said softly. "Draw my own marks, in the spirit of the Banoir and Sienjans, like you described." Piecora grinned as she continued applying the ink to Ortor's face. "Oh, if Moth could see you now, savage," she sneered. "They won't want you back." "No, they would not accept this," Ravsés said, gesturing around her face. "There is no going back now. But as of Unskavia, I would say they would love this feature of your people and the Banoir. Oh, the freedom of open expression. I long for the day when the lid finally blows off the kettle and we rise again." Before Piecora could ask what she meant, Rultin came clomping back into the room. The mess from the fight with the changeling had been cleared, the grotesque amorphous body contained within its cloak like a sack of wet clay and disposed of by the rat, who knew the proper procedures for such things. After speaking for a while with several members of the rat outside in front of the sagery shop, Rultin returned to the study where Piecora, Ravsés and Ortor were. "The Hand o' Aries be out and about for some reason, all the way down from Kelganost," said Rultin soberly. "E'er meet one of these monsters before?" Piecora slowly shook her head while applying the final marks to Ortor's face. "I've seen some strange Shiendi in my travels through the wildlands, but that was truly awful. What was that? Where did it come from? And why did it come for you?" she asked. "Shape changes made deep in the bowels of Kelganost. Assassins. They can mimic the likeness and voice of anyone they can see. They look into your mind and pluck from your memories and thoughts, someone on your mind or met recently. Very convincing, less you cut 'em and see if they bleed." "Assassins?" said Ravsés. "Why? Oh, I should have stayed home." Piecora pointed a finger directly into Ravsés's face and said, "No going back. Remember that. She then stood up and walked over to a bucket of hot water procured by Rultin while they cleaned the mess from the fight and began washing her hands of the Silijan ink. "Why are they here, Rultin?" she demanded without looking back at him. "Is there more you're not telling us?" "I'm just as amazed as ye," he replied indignantly, waving his hands. "That's all I know." Piecora turned around and glowered at him while toweling off her hands. "You said they are made in Kelganost. What did you mean?" Rultin searched the ground with his eyes as if he were being interrogated. Well, there's a belief round here that strange magics, dark sorceries goes on beneath the city in the north. City of Ares, city of Kelg, deep underground in its black pits. They grow the assassin creatures with black alchemy and untold horrors. I know nothing else except if you see one it's too late. I ne'er seen one before nor been targeted by one, but surely I ne'er seen one on a wrong end o' an angry Sienjan guide. Lo, I've ne'er seen fighting like that in me life before." She walked past him to the ornate table and picked up the small hand crossbow. She looked up at the projectile embedded in the rafter above, then held the deadly weapon in front of Rultin. "Look at this weapon. It was already loaded when he drew it out. What craftsmanship is this? Who makes such a device and for what purpose? I can't fight something like this if it's used properly. This thing made a mistake, exposed itself and didn't expect my reaction. Had I been just a little bit slower—" "'Twouldn't be handling that thing so much, lass," Rultin said, taking the weapon from her as if picking up a dead rat by the tail. He held it close to his face and peered at its intricate engineering. "Inside there be poison, I wager. Small sponge, soaked with it, self-contained so nothing leaks out. Dart pokes through and gets coated with a scorpion's venom, found only up there in the lower mountains round Kelganost when it's loaded, just before the job. Painful death it is. Cruel assassinary work it is." "Rultin, I need you to think," Piecora said, exasperated. "If these shape-changing assassins are all the way down here from Kelganost, and one got in here and nearly killed you despite whatever protections you have from the rat or these crows from Cedars Peak, it means you managed to somehow gain someone's attention, and they want you dead. When they learn that this one failed, another will come, maybe more. Can you think of anything that you have done that might have drawn the ire of Kelganost?" He looked at her wildly with fear and confusion. "Do ye even hear herself?" he said, gently placing the crossbow back onto the ornate table. "I'm a lowly heavener. I run a bookshop. I'm nobody." "You also run Velastrum Tapetius," Piecora said sternly. "You're a smuggler. You're widely known in underground circles. You're aligned with the rat here, and you have contacts in every city and village throughout the country." He dismissed the accusation. "Gah, I don't run the tapestry. I merely play a part. Bunch of others doing just what I do. The shop serves as a front whether I'm here or not. Serpentis old mansion. That became both museum and safe house for us, and I guess you can say I had a hand in it." "What do you mean by that?" Piecora interrupted him. Rultin looked down, caught unawares by a sudden memory. "Well, the mansion. I brokered the deal with the Callistico Family Trust. They bought the deed to the mansion." Ravsesi suddenly became wide awake, remembering her dream encounter during the voyage. Something Rultin said sounded painfully familiar. Piecora stepped closer to Rultin. "Rultin, I need to know everything, if I am to do my job effectively," she said with a simmering voice. "Who knows what else might come through that door tonight? We need to make a plan, and we can't wait around playing these Fdelkin head games that you bricklayers love so much." Rultin rubbed his hands up and down his arms in frustration and fear, avoiding her gaze. "Ease up, Sienjan. I'm trying. Lots happened tonight and I'm still getting used to still being alive. And it ain't lost on me that ye saved my life. You're asking questions and I'm still wondering how I'd have died if ye weren't here. Poison arrow in a belly? Choked? Eaten? Snake in a bed? What would they do with the body?" "What's got you worked up about the mansion deal?" Piecora persisted, letting her emotions suddenly burn through. Rultin threw his hands up in front of his face. "Callistico Family Trust bought the deed to the mansion." "Yeah, that's right, you heard that right. The long-dead Callistico family owns Museus Antiquatum Endium. Don't ask me how or anything." "What are you even talking about?" asked Piecora incredulously. "Nobody else in this room has even heard of this Callistico before." Ravsese, still seated on the couch with her son, both now marked with the black Cillian ink designs on their faces, raised her hand halfway to mention that she had, in fact, heard the name before, but she was too afraid to speak. "It came from the creature in her dream during the voyage." Rultin turned and walked to a small desk against the wall behind him and began rummaging through documents. "Holy House Callistico, once proud and powerful merchant family of Alagost from generations ago, put to ruin o'ernight. Just all of a sudden, as the stories say, all the money was gone, along with the assets. Hells, the family mansion fell straight down in a sinkhole right when it all happened. Damnedest thing if ye believe the stories. And I for one do, 'cause I know a few of the family as they are now, broken, beaten down, working odd jobs to stay alive. Family all dispersed across the realm. Some came here, all beggars now, begging for coin from the off-chance kindness of others. Sometimes I'll pull one off the street and give 'em a job for some coin. They're all heirs and heiresses to their own family fortunes, as far out of their reach as I am to the sun. Nobles and rags. Once a name with honour, now something else. Something nobody quite understands. Sad story." Ravsese felt a pit in her stomach. Something about this whole tale resonated with her for reasons she could not possibly begin to understand. "So, if this once powerful family is no more, and their own house fell right through the floorboards, then how in stag's guts did they purchase the museum?" Rultin lifted a scroll, peeked at its edges, and unfurled it slightly to read the inside, then said, "Ah, this is it." He then moved over to the large ornate table, pushed maps and documents and oddities to the side, and laid out a long scroll pulled from an ivory umbilicus. On either end was the Callistico sigil, a gold harp in a wave of flowing water. "Serpendis was enamoured with the Callistico name," Rultin muttered to himself while weighing down the edges of the legal document. "Said they be masters at getting into someone's good graces. I call it conniving. But he said they believed the best diplomacy flowed in two forms, music and water, hence the harp and the wave. To make your point you gotta immerse 'em, make 'em forget their own position, and that only yours exists. Takes time, but they come round eventually. Oh, he was an expert on the Callistico. Shame he ain't round now to help us." "Seems right, based on what I knew of him," Piecora said softly while looking over the elaborately detailed document. Fine sepia calligraphic shapes, curves, dots and lines were vignetted within the document by beautifully rendered filigree in lush watercolour, along with friezes of vines and flowers adorning the edges and corners. On the left bottom corner, worked within the ornamentation, was the golden harp, and on the right bottom corner was the motif of a wave of water. At the document's bottom centre was the Alagostan device, 3 large, thin, gold, concentric rings on a field of black set within each other, perfectly aligned. Within its centre was the gold, 7-pointed star, known as the Alagostan star, and in the centre of the star was a multi-sailed galleon on a large wave. In the upper left corner was the painted portrait of a muscular man, bearded, looking down from stormy clouds and wielding a bright bolt of lightning. In the right corner, also looking down, but from gentler clouds and rays from the sun peeking through, was the stern countenance of a matronly woman. "What I am looking at?" she asked, as she lacked the knowledge to read written words, but was endlessly fascinated by the tightly ornamented compositions of Canonian documentation. Rultin continued muttering to himself unintelligibly as he slowly moved his large, grisly hand down the long, vertical parchment. Finally he said, "This here be the deed to Museus Antiquatum Endium, paid in one lump sum o' 100,000 gold Alagostan coins, all purely minted as if pressed the day before. This here in small letterin be the legal stipulations, and o'er here be the Calistico lineage. And looker, at the bottom of the tree, at the end of it all, see what it says." He pointed his ginger root index finger at a long string of eloquent symbols. "What does it say?" Piecora asked, growing increasingly exasperated. He looked up at her and said, "Eindon Jevanction, o' the Vandus line that comes in from the side. What else are the Vandus? Who are the Vandus? No one knows, but here he be at the end of the Calistico line." Piecora puzzled her face. "I don't understand." Rultin leaned against the large desk, folded his arms, then waved a hand in the air, saying, "I drew it all up without really thinking about it, right there in the mayor's office. Bassy von Olm himself be there, as was several others, including the dignitary who signed this document with Eindon's name, Eindon Vandus, that's what he goes by. But the representative signed it with Eindon's full name. I wasn't thinking at the time. Can you even imagine what 100,000 gold Alagostan flecks looks like? The bags filled half the room. 'Twas all I could do to keep the pen from shaking and my sweat dripping on the page. Ne'er occurred to me until later that no one had seen his full name before, or even that he had a fuller name at all. Piecora looked at him with an expression that conveyed a pained desperation to understand the meaning of everything he was saying. "You fail to see the connections," Rultin said. "The tapestry be running independently for years, mostly out of graciousness of people's hearts. People up and down the social order. Fishers, cobblers, merchants and bookshop owners, rich and poor, all out of the public purview. Everything stitched together by our word alone, and the mission we served together. Serpendis be a major benefactor, the source of a lot of our money, but he ne'er came back from his trip to the east, and things be up in the air for a while for us afterward. We weren't sure what would happen with his money, as he didn't have any kids and no close family, except for his servants and pets. Ye had his statue built from the money he left ye, and we turned his mansion into the museum and safe house for the tapestry, but how would our operation continue? We can't afford it on our own. We get a little bit from the rat and the mayor, but that's it. Then along comes this Alagostan noble's representative, a second wagon entirely filled full of gold coin. How he survived the road to get here, I'll never know. I'm summoned by the mayor, and when I get there, Bassivonen, I just staring at the bags o' Alagostan gold filling his office. The rep had this document all drawn up like you see Aaron hands us both pens, reading from a script from the mouth o' Eindon Vandus, the man who ruined and took over the Calistico generations ago, announcing his intention to buy the deed to the mansion, that we still be running it, but the Calistico family trust owns it. And when I say we, I mean the tapestry, velastrum tapetius. So not only does he somehow know we exist, but now he owns us. Then these two show up from Muth and I almost get murdered in the middle of the night. So ye asked what's been bothering me, there it is. "Why would some rich noble from Alagost want to buy the mansion here?" asked Piecora. "Did he know that it was already turned into a museum?" "They know it's a museum, says so on a deed here," said Rultin, pointing at a cluster of symbols on the scroll. "Museus Antiquatum Endium," says right on there. And whatever space was left after Serpendis's collection was installed, the rest be filled out by items from the Calistico collection. Has its own wing, in fact. Not only do they know it's a museum, they also know it's a front for the tapestry, and they've been funding us since they took over. Never met Eindon, but his money comes in whene'er we need it. 'Tis a blessing, except I hate not knowing who's pulling the strings behind us." Piecora turned around and paced slowly in a circle in the middle of the room. Ravsis watched on, unable to predict what might happen next. She thought she was able to keep up with Rultin's topsy-turvy exposition simply because she was familiar with the general intrigues that come with urban life from her own experiences in Muth. Piecora finally stopped and said, "I still don't understand any of these twisted plots you're talking about, Roltin. All I know is that we need to get out of this city." "Where to?" asked Roltin, exasperated. "We should go to Alagost," said Ravsesi suddenly, breaking the tension before Piecora could answer. They both turned and looked at Ravsesi with surprise in their eyes, as if they had completely forgotten she was there. "It's not safe in this city for any of us," Ravses continued. "Your new benefactor lives in Alagost, if I understand correctly. Maybe we should meet him. I'm sure he has his own guard. Apparently his gold travels well on the roads to reach you. Trained soldiers, perhaps, probably better security than the rat and a murder of crows anyway. And besides, Alagost is your capital, if my knowledge of Canonia is correct. The seat of power over the whole country. I am certain the laws are enforced there with an actual militia employed by the throne. Might make it more difficult for assassins to reach us there. That is, if they even know where we went, and if Kelganost is foolish enough to move against Alagost, both being among the 7 cities. Coast Haven, on the other hand, nobody cares, am I right? So they can hunt us with impunity while we remain here. But in Alagost, that changes everything. If we slip out of Coast Haven and travel quickly and quietly, no one will miss us. Also, Piecora can ask this wealthy, mysterious lord directly to fund her expedition to Cienja. I'm certain he'll agree, given he endorses the tapestry's efforts, and I assume he can afford it. The room fell into a moment of awkward silence, as both Roltin and Piecora passed through Ravses's explanation. Finally, Roltin said, "Madness. 'Tis madness to go—" "It's our only move," Piecora said, cutting him off. "I hate the idea. I hate the city. I can barely tolerate Coast Haven, so I can't imagine what Alagost is like. But we can't wait around here for more Callistico gold to arrive from your secret sponsor to fund the expedition. If I'm to take her and her son through the wildlands safely, I'll need more supplies than I usually need. Horses, a cart and driver, and sellswords. It's not like how I normally do things, but as you said earlier, this one is different." "We don't require much," said Ravsesi. "We made it across the Salt Sea with barely anything. I don't see why—" "The wildlands are different," Piecora cut in. "The journey is long and unpredictable. Every day brings something new. We'll need to be prepared for anything if I am to keep you and your son alive." Roltin waved his arms and slapped his thighs. "Well, that be it then. I'll make sure to tell—" "You should come with us to Alagost," Ravsesi said. Roltin whirled around to face her. "Nonsense. I'm a Havener through and through. No chance I'm—" "She's right," Piecora said. "You can't stay here either. You're marked, just like us. It's all bigger than we can understand right now, but this I know. You won't last another night, even if I'm with you, if what you say is true about these shape-shifting assassins. This one came at you right where you live. If I were just a moment slower, you'd be dead already. You're coming with us, my friend. Besides, we'll need a guide in Alagost." "Ha! The guide who needs a guide. Oh yeah, that's rich indeed," he laughed darkly. "I ne'er even been to Alagost." "You know people in every city," insisted Piecora. "You're Canonian. You talk and think and act Canonian. Look at me. Look at them. Horns and tails and goat's eyes. They're monsters to these people. And nobody takes Cienjans seriously here except those in Enigrad, and nobody takes Enigradans seriously. Can you imagine the 3 of us on our own wandering around in these lands with Stag knows what trying to kill us? We need you, Roltin, and you need my protection because they're after you too. We'll find answers in Alagost." "Fine then. Let me pack some things and we can be off," Roltin grumbled. "We'll need to visit the museum as well," Ravses said, "to get our things that the tapestry graciously gave us. It's not much, just a couple of bags, warm clothes and essentials. Will that be too much trouble?" "Not at all," said Roltin. "It's nearby. Winter's coming. You'll need those layers." He disappeared through another doorway, and Ravses heard hurried footsteps on wooden stairs, followed by loud creaks and thumps above them. Piecora looked at her, shrugged, and said, "I wish I understood any of this. I'm not meant for these intrigues." "I was, unfortunately, Ravsisi said, with a weak smile. Muthans and Canonians are so alike, in so many ways. After locking up the sagery, the four companions quietly made their way through the city as it started to rain, weaving through dark, narrow, twisting alleys filled with trash and debris. They came upon the small open square with the statue of Serpendis and the wreckage of the wagon still strewn around the statue's base. The rain gently patted against the torn canvas fabric as it lay soaked in puddles on the wet cobblestone ground. Rultin, wearing a backpack and heavy cloak with the hood drawn over his head, approached the statue and climbed through the wreckage. He reached into the statue in what looked like an innocuous recess between the folds in the statue's robe and pulled out a key. "You store the museum key in Serpendis robes?" asked Piecora incredulously. "This gets us into the back way," said Rultin. "And yes, we keep a lot of things in a statue that nobody'll ever find. Glad it's strong." He looked down and around him at the broken pieces of the crashed wagon. With key in hand, they were off. Piecora, Ravsis and Orator, led by Rultin, scurried through Coast Haven's neglected side streets and dilapidated tunnels, pausing occasionally around corners, within storefronts, and beneath overhangs, as the white moon slid beneath a blanket of rain clouds rolling in from the salt sea. They finally arrived at the back of a large white stone building, within an especially dark and congested alley. As Rultin drew the key from his pocket, a light, chirpy meow was heard from somewhere beneath them. Orter bent down and picked up an orange and white tabby cat, wet from the rain. He held it in front of him, arms out straight with his hands around the cat's torso as the cat purred and squirmed. Ravsese knelt beside her son and said quietly, "Well now, who found who? Hold it by its bottom like this, and bring it close to you, Ortur." Piecora looked up and surveyed the dark walls of the surrounding alley, knowing Hyro was up there somewhere, eyeing the cat with great interest. "No cats in a museum," growled Rultin as he fumbled with the key in the lock. "Dirty things, bad luck, everything be a toy for them." The heavy wooden door pushed open, and the cat jumped from Ortor's grasp and bolted into the dark interior. "Gods in hells," rumbled Rultin, slapping his forehead. "Bah! Let me get some light in here." They shuffled into the darkness until Rultin was able to strike a lantern to softly illuminate the surprisingly large apartment in its soft, orange ambient glow. The room contained several comfortable beds, shelves with books and games, a small wood stove with a full set of cookery on the wall next to it, several lush carpets on the floor, a wooden desk, and a table each with several wooden chairs, a full-size wash tub with a sink and spigot beside it, and clean towels folded over the tub's edge. Several landscape paintings and decorative tapestries hung on the walls. Ravsisi and Ortor spent a couple nights here when they first arrived while the tapestry coordinated the trip to Amedia, the one that was ambushed. Rultin moved about the room lighting more lamps and candles as Ravsis went over to one of the beds and began gathering their things into the 2 rucksacks the tapestry gave to them. A dull thump sounded above them, through the wooden ceiling, and Rultin carried his lamp up the stairs in the far corner of the room. "Damn cat! You had to let the cat in, didn't you?" he grumbled. Shortly after, he came back down slowly with a strange look on his face. Behind him followed several other figures, the one in the lead carrying the tabby cat. He wore a fine dark blue cloak lined with dark fox fur along its edges, clasped at his neck by a large silver brooch. Beneath the cloak, he wore a dark grey leather doublet set with iron rings that came down to his thighs, lined with black tassels. A wide black leather belt with a large silver buckle of a wolf's head wrapped around his waist. Slung on the belt was a longsword in a dark blue sheath with fine sliver ornamentation at his side. Dark grey leather breeches and black riding knee boots adorned his legs, along with a dark blue leather codpiece lined with fox fur that matched his cloak. He wore black leather gloves that came up to the elbows on his hands. Both the boots and gloves were unembellished, but were of extremely fine make, and fitted specifically for him. His countenance was a pale, chiselled, clean-shaven face with a sharp, square jaw. His dark brown hair was long and flowed fluidly around a silver tiara made with intricate, boxy, geometric designs. His small, light blue eyes were set far apart and burned with intensity beneath his heavy, thick brows. Ravsés couldn't believe what she was seeing, and for a moment she couldn't breathe, so caught she was within the excruciating limbo between fear and attraction, both in equally debilitating measure. It was Doglir, son of Dorian Veklische, Chancellor to the King of Muth, Mendelshus Neumann, and Artor's father. By the breath of the 8 winds, he's found me already, she thought to herself as her mind raced to comprehend her options. Behind him came 6 of his guards whom she also recognised, and when they reached the floor, the guards fanned out and stood in a line on either side of Doglir. Piecora stood in the middle of the room like a statue with her bow drawn. Ravsese pulled Artor in close to her. Rultin skulked away from the Muthans and sat heavily at the table, slumped his shoulders, bent his elbow on the table, and hid his face in his hand, in complete shame and dejection. Doglir's eyes never left Piecora as he gently petted the orange cat in his arms. Finally, he said quietly, "Are you prepared for the consequences, Xianjian? Let loose the arrow and let's find out." "I'll put one in each of you before you even know it," Piecora seethed. "That I am certain of," said Doglir. "You must be Piecora Tjorold, the Xianjian guide. Yes, word of you has even reached our ears. Relax your arm, hero. We are not here to bring violence." "But I might bring it to you, for the act of being here at all," Piecora said. "Do not try to pacify me with your tongue, Muthan. We know why you are here. Look around, there are no witnesses but us. What if 7 unlucky travellers found their misfortunes in Coast Haven in some forgotten alley, as so many do? The city is dangerous at night, not safe to be out and about." Doglir raised his hands at his sides. "What if? We haven't drawn our weapons. Would you still murder us? Or has the Xianjian guide truly lost her humanity to the wildlands?" A tense moment passed in the room before Ravsesi said, "Piecora, wait. This is not the way. Not here. I want to hear what he has to say." "Words are pointless," Piecora growled. "Not here, Piecora. Please. Words are sharper here than your weapons," said Ravsesa. Slowly, Piecora lowered her bow, relaxed the string and stepped aside. Doglir then stepped down from the second stair, and Ravsesa remembered how short he was. All of his guards around him stood at least a head taller than him. Still, he was taller than her, which she also remembered. He crossed the room nonchalantly toward Ravses and Artor, briefly nodding at Piecora as he passed. When he arrived at the bed, he knelt before them and addressed Artor, caressing his hair and face with his large hand. He then lifted the cat and placed it in Artor's arms. The cat, purring the whole time, seemed perfectly content at being warm and dry regardless of the drama playing out around him. "How's my beautiful son?" Doglir asked. Artor stared back at him blankly, but not unknowingly. There was an expression of hidden yearning on his face, and Ravses could tell a maelstrom of emotions were colliding behind the boy's outward solemn visage. "Still has trouble speaking, does he?" said Doglir quietly as he looked up at Ravsesa. "Yes, my lord," she replied. Always, no matter what, she fell back to her training, her social protocols that have been with her since she was a child. Her ingrained etiquette served as her first and last lines of defence when confronted with any form of anxiety. The dictates of stoic Muthan formality and order were her escape and salvation when things broke down around her. It was how she coped and was all she knew. Doglir rose and sat closely next to Ravses. She could smell his familiar cologne, his breath and his hair, and it sent her wistfully back to her previous life in Muth, in the Veklische mansion in Norschlan, when they were together in secret. She could hear the tabby cat purring contentedly in Autor's gentle arms, and it comforted her. "Look there," Doglia said softly to her, gesturing toward the door to the dark alley where the rain was coming down harder than when they first arrived. "You can leave if you want to. The door is open, and we are not guarding it. I did not come to capture you. I just wanted to see you, and to hear you tell me, in person from your lips, what you want. Not as a servant employed by the family, but as the one I love." Ravsisi stared down at her hands, unable to speak. Like her son, she too was a roiling cauldron of emotions behind a placid face, yet she felt her flesh burning up. She had so much to say all at once, but she could not bring any words to her mouth. "If you came back with me, I would make everything right," Doglia said. "Our son would have his father, and you'd have your husband. You wouldn't be a servant. You'd be a Veklish, free to go about as you please." "There is no freedom beneath your father," she blurted out. She heard the words as if they were spoken by someone else. She continued, "You are second in line to be Chancellor to the King, groomed your whole life for that role. Do you find freedom in that? Your father watches your every move, and he rejects me and my son. It was behind his back that you sent me to Eindungzirk to have Autor, and I know all the money you sent us was stolen from your father's coffers. The Unskavia are not people to him. He will never accept me or Autor to be with his son." "I will change that," said Doglia. "I can change my father's mind. I know he loves you as he loves his family. We are a stain on his family, his reputation and his honour." She spat back at Doglia. "You cannot change your father, as I cannot change you. For though you think you love me, it is a false love. Even now you covet me like a favourite pet who got loose from the mansion grounds and must be returned before it is harmed or stolen. A thing you may truly love is still a thing that you own, and the two are inseparable in your mind. You cannot comprehend otherwise. This is your life, Doglia. It is all that you know. I had very little to do or say in your affections for me. But you don't see it that way. You mistake my compliance, my abeyance for reciprocated love. Something you feel you deserve, that you've earned by your kindness. You cannot understand the consequences of displeasing you, so for my own survival and my own family name, and for the honour of your family and your name, I pleased you, and Autor came from that which you took from me at an age when I barely understood who I was. I am older now, and I see with clarity the nature of the relationship we had. Despite all of your graciousness and your dear heart, Doglia, I am beneath you just like I am beneath your father. And just because you favoured me does not mean I owe that back to you. But you will never see that." Doglia stood up and faced Ravsis. "Do you think I have my father's blessing to be here?" he said hotly. "Do you think I had his permission to steal his money? Is it a self-righteous, ignorant, privileged convenience for me to risk everything for you? Am I truly who you say me to be? Or might you be wrong about me? The day I learned you were with our child, I ran through all of the possibilities, all of the futures, all of the paths we could take together. I knew then that even if before it was a false love, a selfish love, an immature love, it was now a real, selfless, torturous love. One that understood everything that was at stake and willing to give it all away. If my father rejects you, rejects us and our marriage, then I reject him. I will disown him and the Chancellery. You are all that I care about in this world." Ravsis looked up with sad, mournful eyes and said softly after several moments of silence, "I would grieve for you if I loved you. I would leap into your arms, and we would face whatever storms that lie before us, together, including the wrath of your father and the ruining of the world if I loved you. But even now you cannot understand that no matter how much you want me to, I cannot, for I never did. You just simply cannot accept that people are who they are, will do what they do and feel what they feel, no matter how much you pour your influence onto them. And even if you could sway me, would you truly accept that as love? Even if you convinced me to love you and proved to me that there is no other man in this world better for me, would your heart be at ease knowing that my love was purchased with the currency of your efforts? In all of our days together, could you find happiness knowing that I never gave it freely? Doglear dropped his hands to his sides, utterly disarmed and broken. He dropped to a knee and reached for Ravsis's hand, kissed it, and held it to his cheek. She felt a warm tear from his eye merging with her soft white hand. "Your words expose me to my torture," he whispered. "I am in a cage of ignorance, surrounded by blades of consequences. No matter what I do, I am wrong. I cannot move, cannot speak, trapped within the delusion of what I wish for but cannot have." He slowly looked into her eyes and said, "Not if it isn't given freely." He looked over at Arta and placed his hand on the boy's knee. Then he smiled at the purring cat in Arta's arms, sighed and said, "You have a gentle soul, son, a kind and wondrous heart. I can see it in you, and I shall not mar it any further. Look after your mother, will you?" Arta blinked and nodded as he awoke into the present and acknowledged being addressed directly by his father. Ravses saw that Arta recognized Doglear, but his expression was still a mystery. Doglear then stood up, placed both hands on either side of Ravses's face, and kissed her forehead warmly between her white goat-shaped horns. Softly he said, "I will always love you both, and there shall never be another for me." He then turned, gestured toward his guards to follow, and together they all silently left the hidden apartment beneath Museus Antiquatum Endium into the pouring rain and dark morning of Coast Haven. Thank you for listening to this chapter from the Book of Urm. If you enjoyed this reading, like and subscribe to our channel, and consider supporting us at the Book of Urm at patreon.com.